In this edition of Generations, we revisit the Active Ager, and a year on from our first interview with Age of Majority, we catch up with them to see what's changed and what's happening in the world of marketing when it comes to the older consumer. Are lessons being learned by the advertising industry? And Judy Jenks from seniorcenterct.org talks more about becoming an active ager in today's society. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith and welcome to Generations, a new podcast for people of your generation. There are so many terms and labels that we use for ourselves and others in society, and as we get older, those words don't always sit well with the community they try to represent. A year ago, we spoke with Age of Majority, an agency that was taking the advertising and marketing industries on and re-educating them on how to market to the older community. So what, if anything, has changed in a year? I caught up with Jeff Weiss and Peter Boyce of Age of Majority to find out more. So what have you guys been up to in the year that we last spoke to you?
Lots has been going on, and thanks for having us on again. We'll update you on a few things. We'll start with some really interesting research we conducted a little while ago with 2,500 adults across the U.S. We kind of termed this research, it was really about sex, drugs, and rock and roll with adults across the country. And our title for the research, and Peter will give you some of the key insights in a moment, is Doobies, Dildos, and Drum Solos. So we try to have some fun with it. So I'll turn over to Peter to give you some of the highlights.
Yeah, so look, overall, what we were trying to do with the research is really kind of tap into or capture a sense of the lifestyle of what we call the active aging audience, which is really at 3/4 of the 55 plus audience or crowd. And we've seen a lot of these trends, or heard a lot of these trends, and we wanted to kind of quantify them a little bit. And some of the areas we tapped into, I'll just kind of run through them quickly so we don't give you too much. But obviously a hot topic right now is the whole area of cannabis, especially as legalization kind of expands state by state. And as we've seen it become legal across Canada as well. One of the things we've actually found, even though fewer than 1 in 10 Americans 55 plus have actually, or claimed at least, to consume cannabis in the past year, nearly half of them are more likely to try it today than they were 5 years ago. So any sense of stigma is kind of going away really quickly. They're also really physically active. I guess this may not be much of a surprise, but we want to quantify it a little bit. And for instance, even though we found that overall the population, or a quarter of the population, thinks that older Americans aren't that physically active, they're actually about as physically active as millennials are in terms of having worked out or working out regularly in the past year. They're also as likely to have actually been on the diet as well.
Yeah, and just adding on to that, Brian, on the weekend I was in Albuquerque at the Functional Aging Institute annual summit, and they basically train and give accreditation to trainers who train older consumers. And I was giving away prizes, and I gave one away to the trainer who trained the oldest person. And in that crowd, the oldest client someone had was about to turn 103 years old. So people are being active at all ages.
103, that's absolutely incredible.
Incredible? Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and there's obviously some really important takeaways for that for anybody who wants to kind of reach the older audience in terms of, don't cater to their physical limitations. They're actually really challenging themselves later into life. So it's a big thing to think about.
Yeah, and still want to be competitive in many aspects. I play a lot of tennis. One of my partners I play with regularly is 96 years old. He doesn't move as well as he used to, but man, he can still hit the ball. So people still want to be competitive, and they don't want to be addressed due to their limitations. As Peter said, it's really about kind of making the most out of what they have.
So tell me, when we spoke obviously a year ago, we were talking about using the term active agers. Is that term sort of being picked up a lot more in the year since we last spoke?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we are kind of anti-label, particularly when you look at words like seniors, the word retirement or retirees. boomers even can be problematic. So we use the term active ager more for how we describe the group, the consumer group we're talking about. It is getting more pickup. We're seeing the word active being used a lot more versus other terms. But what we don't see, and I don't think what we want to see, is to as soon as you start to label people, it can turn them off. So active agers isn't something we expect to see being used kind of from an outward facing point of view, but in terms of the conversations we're having, and I know from the searches that we're getting, people are really looking at active agers more now than a year ago for sure.
So what other things are new from the year ago that we last spoke to you?
Peter, you want to talk about sex?
Yeah, well, as Jeff alluded to with the name of our research report, we when we wanted to delve into the lifestyles of this older audience, we had to look at all aspects of it. We didn't want to ignore their sexual habits as well, and maybe not a huge surprise for people who are in that older audience at least, but nearly 2/3 of the 55 plus crowd are still having sex at least once a week, and many having every single day. So they're actually continuing to spice things up with a lot of interest in things like sex toys. People were not holding back in terms of sharing some of their interests here. But one of the things actually is quite interesting from this is the interest in online dating, which actually might be a bit of a surprise, is that Americans 55 plus are actually larger or bigger users of online dating sites than millennials are. And we're seeing, sites like, or companies like Lumen, for instance, which are really catering to this audience and doing really cheeky billboard campaigns and things like that. So that's something that we're going to see, I think, a lot more recognition of going forward. But certainly it taps into that lifestyle. The one thing I should add on to that's interesting is that even though they're out having fun, they aren't necessarily getting any wiser. And when we ask the question about are you actually concerned about things like STIs or STDs, nearly 6 in 10 say they don't worry about them at all. So, getting older doesn't necessarily make you smarter or more cautious in that perspective.
Yeah, just adding on another point to that Brian, sex is has always been kind of a taboo subject, particularly when we're talking about older consumers. So we're seeing that slowly start to change as kind of the facts and figures come out. And kind of probably the biggest reasons for kind of driving. Firstly, you've got a lot of people who are becoming empty nesters. So all the kids have left home, and they're kind of on their couples are on their own and want to rekindle their relationship and sex life. Plus, as Peter mentioned, in terms of dating sites, you've got a lot of people who have either split and divorced, or you have widows, widowers who are back on the dating scene. So sex is becoming a hotter topic, so to speak, with active aging consumers. For sure, at all ages.
That's a fascinating insight, but I suppose not one that we should be totally shocked about. Yeah. So tell us as well, apart from those insights from a year ago, you've also got a book in development as well. Let's talk about that.
Sure. We're excited to, this is our first book that we're writing. And basically it's going to be looking at the opportunities from a business point of view and marketing to active aging consumers, why they're kind of a forgotten group and why marketers aren't focused on them. And then we've also got our Dirty Dozen Myths of Aging, and that really gets into the reasons, mainly societal ageism, and kind of why marketers and businesses tend to forget about and not think about active aging consumers. And along with that, some case studies and stories from businesses, as well as practical tips. And then, excuse me, one of the things that, we're finding out a lot, or especially over the past years, we talked to more and more companies, we're encountering something called FOMO, which for most people means fear of missing out, which is very much a millennial kind of thing. But FOMO for us is what we call fear of marketing older. And we see this all the time with people, where we go through the numbers, the stats, the facts, they're all there. We go through the myths, we debunk those, and they're ready to kind of move forward. The light bulbs have gone off, and then you hit a wall, and that wall we call FOMO, fear of marketing older. And that's really driven by the biases and myths in society that are still there, even after you put all the facts and figures in front of people. So we're going to get into more in our book about how do you kind of, what do you do about, addressing your fear of marketing over your FOMO. And there's kind of, about 5 key things I'll just go through really quickly. The first is follow the money. And, you don't have to do a lot of digging to uncover where the opportunity is across the vast majority of categories. Second is to really look around. Sometimes it's just a matter of going out to places and seeing what these older consumers look like. They're not like what we used to portray them as in society. Next is to do the research. So if you don't believe the data, do your own research to confirm the opportunity. And, we've done enough research to know now that all comes out in the wash. And then a lot of it's just testing and learning. So it's still, I'm not sure. I still have this fear. All the numbers there, research is there. So the next step is often let's test and learn, adapt, and then start to move kind of more resources and focus. And then fifth, which I have to say is a little self-serving, is to work with an expert because there's a lot of folks out there, a lot of agencies, consulting businesses who just do not know this target group, this active aging consumer, and it's easy to kind of miss the boat and do something wrong. So our book's going to encompass all that, and it'll be out this fall. We're very excited about it.
Sounds great. So we'll keep an eye out, obviously, for that. Hopefully will be a very big sort of like resource for, as I say, your target market of those marketers out there. Now, talking of the industry, what else has changed in the industry?
Well, one of the things I speak of might be of specific interest to a number of members of your audience, Brian, is, and I'm reading a lot about this, some of the challenges that senior centers and what we call, or what are known as senior communities, are facing in terms of attracting kind of that next generation of users, the younger user, without alienating kind of the older users as well. It's very much a challenge that we're seeing, sort of across the country right now. And we were just thinking about, what are some of the things to have, sort of what helpful things you might be able to offer for people in that industry to consider. And some we've actually touched on already when we talked about not focusing on physical limitations. And that's really, in your communications, if you're marketing, if you're working in this industry and you're trying to attract people to use some of your services or facilities, just think about not dwelling on their physical limitations, but focusing on some of the things that you can actually help them continue to challenge themselves physically, but at the same time, think about offering maybe options or versions of sports or other physical activities that kind of acknowledge that people do have physical limitations as well. So there's something for everyone. So there might be kind of a scaled back version of yoga, for instance, for people with arthritis, something like that. And then same thing with the language in your marketing communication. Just don't avoid terms like, it's simple, but avoid terms like seniors or old or anything that sort of alludes or, gives off the idea that people are challenged somehow. And then think about, if you need to attract people to your industry, what kind of people ideally do you want to attract? And, are you, in your communication and what you're offering to them, is that going to appeal to them? I mean, that's just ultimately the question you have to ask yourself.
Yeah, and Brian, we're also seeing kind of the effects of ageism that's creeping into our own lives. And, we often kind of say, oh, that's driven by, millennials, younger people, but we're seeing it all the time with active aging consumers. So things, for example, I'm always not amazed, but I'm a little surprised when, someone who's in their late 50s or 60s, and you go onto their LinkedIn page and they do not want to put anywhere on there any idea of kind of how old they are when they graduated. So it's stuff like that. People saying, oh, I've got a senior moment because you forget something. In that case, I've had senior moments throughout my life because I'm just not good at remembering things. So we're seeing it, kind of ageism come to life across all different ages. I just read an article this morning from Forbes. There's a lot of talk in business about, inclusion and diversity, and it's almost all focused on, racism and sexism. But only 8% of companies consider age when they're talking about diversity and inclusion. So, workplace and ageism in the workplace is a huge, huge thing. So we're starting to see that creep up more. And that has the effects in terms of what you see from a marketing point of view and a focus with consumers. And then all I have to do is, go into, a card shop and look for cards for people that are older, and they're the corniest. It's like you get these cards and it's like, oh, the next card's going to be, sorry that you passed away. They're depressing. And, active agers want to live life to the fullest. And, one of the key messages, think about kind of wellness before health, because people want to know that they're moving forward versus, it's the next step to the grave.
One of the things that I suppose anyone listening to this may, be thinking is, this is all well and good. And yes, of course, we should try and get away from stereotypes, but are we also in danger of becoming too politically correct? And, humor goes a long way sometimes. And are we sort of like dangerously on the edge of sort of like losing our sense of humor as well to a certain degree over some of this? I know not every situation is a humorous one, but I mean, humor does play a big part in all of our lives, whatever our ages.
It's very true, Brian. It's something actually that it's actually covered off in our research report. We actually delved into that a little bit, that whole sense of political correctness and, have we gone too far over the edge, and kind of comparing results for different age groups. So as maybe it's not a surprise, maybe it's a stereotype, but the older consumer is more likely to feel that we've gone a bit too far. Not that there's not a sense of, or conscious here or conscious of what they're saying, but they're much more likely to say that we've gone too far. And we can we'll give our website a little bit later on, but that's something you can download from this research report that Jeff mentioned. We kind of cover that off a little bit, but absolutely, certainly what we found backs up what you're saying.
Another thing I want to touch on with you, Jeff, specifically is you very publicly turned 55 this year, posted videos. Why did you do it, and what was the sort of response to that?
Well, I did it because I like to have fun. But the main reason I did it is, society, thinks that as soon as you hit 55, you kind of drop off. And from a marketing point of view, you'll rarely see a creative brief, a research brief, a media buying brief for anyone over the age of 55. So society kind of believes that once you hit that golden age of 55, things start to happen to you, and they're kind of related to the myth. So, in preparation for my big birthday in April, I thought, I better do the things to get ready for it. So, if you go to we've got a YouTube channel that's got some videos we did. So I did everything from, buying Grecian formula to put in my hair, which, to be honest, didn't really work. Although in the video we had to touch it up a bit. I went out and got as much brand and fiber I could. I was looking at, canes and mobility devices, trying to find where the best senior discounts were. And also kind of the latest in technology. So that, if I had I've fallen and can't get up moment, what could I do? So it was, really, it was poking fun of all these things that society says is going to happen when you turn 55. But the reality is we know those things don't happen. So it was really about bringing that point to life, but also having fun at the same time. So if you're interested, it's on our YouTube channel.
What sort of reaction did you get, maybe, from either business colleagues or friends or family to that? Because it's, it's a big issue. It's one that you decided to be very public about. So what was their reaction?
Well, that's a good question. From friends who've known me for a while, they just think it's hilarious because a lot of my friends are active aging consumers, and they just laugh because they're all in the same boat that I am. In terms of we have no, limitations, or if we do have some challenges, we get through them. And, these folks are having more fun than they had when they were younger, because they just don't have the stresses and the things they had to deal with before. So from friends and family, they kind of love it. And then from outsiders and business people, it's just another validation to kind of the facts and figures we can put in front of them. It's just people need to stop and kind of think about what society is saying and what the reality is. So it's been incredible response, and we'll do more of that, but probably more getting actual consumers in front of the camera, so that it's not just me talking, but it's people out there across all different varieties of life and ages to say, hey, we're out here and you're ignoring us.
And a quick question, and this can be to either of you, when it comes to the the older consumer, is there like a gender difference at all? Are men more sort of like sensitive to it, or women? Have you found anything from a gender perspective?
Well, I think a couple things from some of the research we've done. We know that, we know that there are more female active agers than men. That's partly because they live longer, although the gap isn't that large, but just women tend to be more active than men. which is one of the key attributes of being an active aging consumer. And we still know that while active agers control about 70% of wealth and at least 40% of all consumer spending, it's still the woman who controls the purse strings for many of those categories. So men tend to be more around, go along for the ride. So in terms of marketing efforts and focus and who the decision makers are and where the purchasing power is, it's definitely skewed more towards the women than the men.
So you said that obviously there's lots of resources which you guys have come up with. Just give us a taster of obviously what listeners can do, where they can go to obviously download some of the great content and resources that you guys have come up with.
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So simply just go to our website, ageofmajority.com. And there's three kind of key resources that I wanted to highlight there that might be of interest. First of all is while we're working on kind of our full book, we've actually also created an ebook called Understanding the Active Aging Consumer. And it really delves into kind of the myths and stereotypes and then the facts that counter each of them around the active aging consumer. Has a great summary of some research we've done into this audience. And I think overall really provides a really good look at the reality that is this consumer and their interests and what their, what the opportunities are with them. The other one, or the next resource, is the one we've mentioned, our research report, which is Doobies, Dildos, and Drum Solos. Again, that's something that really recaps the key areas we looked at. And again, a free download from our website. And as Jeff mentioned, our YouTube channel is also accessible, as well as our other social channels. So we obviously encourage or invite everybody to subscribe to our social channels for an ongoing kind of look at the research that we're sharing, the insights that we're sharing, and we love feedback too from people and hearing what are some of your experiences.
Jeff Weiss and Peter Boyce from Age of Majority. As always, it's great talking to you. Fascinating insights into obviously an incredibly important market sector. Thank you again for joining us on Generations.
Thanks.
And if you want to find out more about the work of Age of Majority and download some great resources and an ebook, you can find that information by visiting their website at ageofmajority.com. And joining us as ever is Judy Jenks from seniorcenterct.org. Judy, good to have you back as always.
And I love being here.
So tell us, you're going to be talking about Active Agers, is that right?
Yes, I am. So who are they talking about? Who are they referring to when they mention those words elders, oldster, senior citizen, old-timer, elderly? Is it you they're talking about? Me? Or are they referring to themselves? I'm not sure anymore because I'm also hearing boomers, Gen X, retirees, and then active ager. Now, I'm liking that term, active ager. It really does kind of fit, doesn't it? When you think about your parents, your grandparents, and perhaps a great-grandparent if you were fortunate enough to have one, and then yourself, you can see that at different points, each generation is very different when they were, say, 40 or 60 or now 80. For example, it is becoming quite popular to be a new parent at 40. Well, 2 generations ago, the majority became grandparents at 40. So you see, each generation is indeed younger than the generations before. Social Security picked age 65 for retirement because for most people, that's about when their life ended. If they were to pick an age now, it most likely would be in the neighborhood of 75 to 80. So if we're living well into our 80s, 90s, and even into 100, we need to live that life differently. Thus, active ager. Look around, set goals, start a whole new life to be lived fully. Start a new career, pick one that's fun, something you couldn't do all those years ago. It's never too late. It's never too late to live.
But it is absolutely true, though. I mean, this whole episode is about active agers. We've talked again a year on with the Age of Majority Agency. And of course, they help organisations to market to the older generation. And like you said, remove these words like senior and elderly because people just don't relate to those anymore.
No. A lot of times it's found to be offensive because I am not elderly. How many times have we heard that from somebody in their 80s or 90s? And when we look at those people in their 80s and 90s, they're still, well, in fact, it was on Facebook. It's been on the news. A 93-year-old woman just won a distance race for her age group, and 93 years old, and you're still out there running.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing will be, over maybe, I don't know, the next few years, is whether or not senior centres change their names, because senior is another term that many older people say, I'm not senior.
Uh-huh. And would an Active Ager Centre be so much more appropriate?
It would be good. It will be interesting
yes.
to see what happens.
And the conversation about the name Senior Center has been discussed for a few decades now, and they have explored what to call it to define it so that it's easily recognizable that it's not for youth, but it is for the older population. So it's that terminology, and that's one of the reasons why I love the term Active Ager, because it really does fit what goes on at senior centers.
I was going to say, because you know better than most, but I mean, you know, when you do go to these centres, lots of good, cool activities going on, physical activities, you know, it's like arts and crafting. I mean, there's absolutely, and this is, I think, again, a misnomer with people as they think, oh, yeah, they just go there, sit around, you know, drink some tea and maybe have a sandwich, and that's as much as they do. But, of course, it couldn't be further from the truth.
It couldn't be further from the truth, but sitting and having that cup of tea and lunch is also very important, because we are social beings and we need to be social. So even if you just wanted to have lunch, that still is something very important to do. And you're active. You're out of the house. You're not just sitting home.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So, I mean, as an active ager yourself, so what things do you like to do?
Well, I'm going to Cape Cod next week, and we are going to be on the beach and out and about and doing a whole bunch of stuff. So, you know, I can't say as though things are any different today than they were 40 years ago, other than we don't have children in the house. We're still doing all of those same things. We're about to get a puppy, and that takes a lot of time and energy, and I would never, ever, ever think to say, oh, we're too old to have a puppy. No, we're young enough to have a puppy. You know, we're going to go out there and we're going to get that dog and we're going to have a great time. We
were speaking earlier in the program to age of majority, and it's all to do with marketing to the older community and getting marketeers and marketers to understand that it is a big group with lots of money. Are you seeing changes? Because, I mean, I'm looking around, and I'm a little bit younger than you, and I'll be honest, I'm starting to see some changes in some of the adverts, maybe in magazines. Are you seeing it?
Yes. If you just start looking at any advertising that you see that has pictures of people or actually people moving in it, you're going to see that in general, they're not people in their 20s or 30s or 40s. You're going to question, well, I'm not quite sure how old they are, but they are older. And a lot of times now when you look around, the next time you're in a store, start looking at the people that are shopping and see if you can identify how old they are, because odds are you don't. And odds are if you see somebody and say, oh, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, they must be a senior, and you're thinking like 65, that person is probably 90 years old. And you're underestimating how old they are. They're much older than you think they are.
Well, we dress differently. We do so many things differently, as you say, these days. And I mean, and your piece that started the segment said, Social Security.
Yeah.
They may have to start rethinking that, I'm sure, at some point, because, people are living longer. Well, I hope you're around for 30, 40, 50 years. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and we will catch up with you on the next episode. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, have a great month.
That's all from this edition of Generations. Don't forget to visit seniorcenterct.org to find out what's going on in your neck of the woods. And if you want to send us a topic to talk about or want to be our guest on the podcast, drop us a line by visiting the seniorcenterct.org website. Go to the bottom of the homepage and click the How to Advertise With Us link to get in touch. From myself, Brian Scott Smith, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.